Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Antonio Guevara. I am a writer, sociologist, and master's degree in Latin American philosophy. I'm currently preparing to start my PhD studies. I am from Venezuela, and now I live in Eugene, Oregon, United States. Thank you very much, Professor Rogelio, for the invitation. Talking about the Venezuelan problem is always a challenge. There are many things that we can talk about. However, I will try, to summarize from my perspective, like sociologist and Venezuela. So I want to make some kind of a brief review of Venezuela. Venezuela have like a political singularity in the region of Latin America with its own social and institutional perspective of these recent years. First of all, the Venezuelan crisis is important and complex. It's like the thing about the region. It's important in the sense that it shows us an unprecedented multifactorial crisis scenario. This is like my hypothesis. In a cultural, economical, political, institutional, even migratory and geopolitical point of view. It is somehow a political or sociological laboratory, that allows us, we can see in Venezuela, whole world can see in Venezuela that the world could become, if the current civilization model continues to be followed. So I think it is complex because Venezuela, in the first, like in the main topic, Venezuela is the country with the largest proven crude oil reserve in the world. And this like the common sense, the commonplace about Venezuela. You can see in everything highlight in the world, on every kind of political analysis, and in highlight in upper letters, we can read Venezuela is the country with the largest proven crude oil reserve in the world. Well, in this case, it's a real thing. It's the reality, and this problem put the country in the center of hegemonic interest. It is also complex because knowing about the situation in Venezuela is very difficult, because those same interests have spread, their version according to their interest of what is happening in Venezuela. Every time the people thinking what is happening, what really happening in Venezuela. So to get closer to Venezuela, to have more clear details about our situation, you have to know that there are certain obstacles, such as the one mentioned. The media barrier, for example, also mediated by those interests, and at the same time, the knowledge built around the crisis that is also built from the different actors' interests. For example, the media, the media communication in Venezuela that represents the interests of the government in one case, and another case, the media from the capital represent its own interest, and Venezuelan capital and abroad, and the hegemonic interest over Venezuela in general. Not only is a national matter. Venezuela is like a very foreign matters in so many points of view. Another actor involved in this situation, the Venezuelan political class and its mediations, especially with the governments of the United States and the European Union. Sorry. Another of these actors involved in this struggle, the academy against the government and the academy in favor of the government. No, in that sense, every time I wonder in that what kind of resources I can recommend about the political situation in Venezuela. No, well, those interests, those independent groups, both inside and outside the academy, for example, in social movements and other groups critical of the Venezuelan political class and hegemonic interest over Venezuela, is a good resource to approach the Venezuelan problem. No? So about the other topic, for example, Venezuela in the region, no? In the Latin America in a multipolar world. In that sense, well, the first thing that I should say is that Venezuela is a singularity in the region, like I told you. Culturally, Venezuela still belong to Latin America. Structurally, its economy and their pattern of stability and instability are more similar to those of other oil-producing countries, like Algeria, Iran, and Nigeria. And we can see, for example, this quote from Terry Lynn Carroll. No? It's very interesting because this excerpt shows our singularity in the region. So, on the other hand, since contemporary Venezuela is a country, and population that comes from a certain wealth, we are like a rich country with a lot of problems. Culturally, we are closer to American culture, USA culture, American in the sense that country, than to the rest of Latin America. Now, in other words, Venezuela, it is closer to the culture of consumption, and importation, for example. This is an example, this picture, about the oil rentier model and oil culture. So the way, for example, the way our cities are made, for example, revolve around installed oil fields by US oil transnational. So our culture has more relationship with the north than with the south. For example, beauty pageants and baseball are fundamental to our culture. No, it is a complete anomaly when in Latin America the favorite sport is soccer. No, that we know we live currently the World Cup. No. On the other hand, everyday language, for example, in Venezuela, is full of English neologisms that come from precisely the arrival of the oil transnational. No? It is that in Venezuela is known such as the oil culture, no, of our rentier culture. What is the oil culture? Well, we live surround in the oil industry now, and the oil industry produce rent, and we call that the rentier culture. No, a rentier culture and an oil culture is an economy based only in the extraction of raw materials, in all these kind of resources, which lives only on the income it produces and the sales of this kind of materials. No, in Venezuela there is no other industry other than the oil, okay, than the oil industry. We buy everything in my country, everything that we eat, everything that we wear, everything is imported in Venezuela. Maybe the current difference is that the Venezuelan dependency in the present, for example, with this, its entire rentier culture is now subservient not only to one power, but to several. In the past, we have some kind of relations with the United States, but in the present, now, faced with the multipolar world, the relation of the Venezuelan government, as in the rest of the subcontinent, have varied, that we know. No? Now we have China and Russia our main trading partner, for example, is now that our subservient situation, no? So in this sense, no, the Venezuelan government has had several initiatives in favor of building new models of relation in the region, no, and with the rest of the world, obviously, no. For example, that is the case of ALBA in organization, or CELAC, or CALAC organization, no, which brings together all the countries of Latin American and the Caribbean. However, given the political instability of the region, no, the coming and going between left and right projects, you know, all these changes in governments, they have not been able to materialize this type of initiative. No, in that sense, not is CELAC or ALBA, or CELAC institution are so solid structure institutions, no, and for that reason, this type of initiative do take their ideological imprints, no, and it's very difficult have some kind of solid institution in that sense, no. So Venezuela and the rest of Latin America continues to need instance, you know, that allow the region to negotiate in a more balanced way with the hegemonic country. No, we see this kind of organizations like a side to negotiate, you know, our relation with the rest of the world. No? So, for example, we have the example of the OAS, you know. So the mediation instance, such as the OAS, for example, are viewed like with great mistrust in the region by represent the interests of the United States. This is a problem, you know. In that sense, there is still no tool that allows Venezuela, no, like other countries in the region, no, not to have a place of negotiation more balanced. You know, for that reason, I said that Latin America, not only Venezuela, all the subcontinent need instance that allow the region to negotiate in a more balanced way with the hegemonic countries. No, so currently we have a paradox. No, the current paradox is that now Venezuela, after seceding from the United States, you know, in the past, has a relationship of dependence no longer with the United States, but with other countries such as China and Russia. No? It's very paradox because I currently say to my friends, it is if the country had gone from dependence on one empire, no, to two empires. No, it's a very difficult situation. No. So about the follow topic, no, the importance for various issues associated with the current situation in Venezuela. For example, we every time going back to the oil thing, no, the importance remains the same as always. We are a petro state, you know, a state that have only a matter, and this matter is the oil, and this matter is the oil culture and oil industry. No, we are a petro state that at the moment of market imbalance, for example, no, such as the case of the Russia or Ukraine war, no, we became again an important option as energy providers. No, however, the problem is that the economic crisis has also collapsed the oil industry. No, we currently have oil industry broken. For example, of the 4 million barrels of oil per day that we produce in the past, for example, some kind of record in oil in our linear live of the oil resources, of the 4 million barrels of per day that we produce in the past. At the present, we have not yet reached 1 million, and this is one of the big reasons of our crisis. No, so in the state that made some kind of country overview, you know, in a political, social, or institutional in recent years. No, if it's like a problem or question of giving a brief of general perspective of the crisis, for example, the following maybe should be said in a political perspective. No, from a political point of view, the country is some kind of a prisoner of the dispute from the state on the part of the political class. In the image, we can see a picture of the Miraflores Palace. This is the Venezuelan government palace. No, this is like the point of the power in our country. No, like a symbolic point of power. No, in the sense of a social problem, for example, all social problems, cultural, health, humanitarian, economic, etc., correspond to the crisis due to the dispute of the state. No, like I told you, the Venezuelan economy always depends of oil and the income it generates. No, and oil prices in the international market. No, depend completely of how the oil market behaves, and each movements in the world affect the oil market that we know. No, the country has always been in this swing. No, however, on this occasion, many factors, as is the case of the political crisis, that is how the way to administer the resources generated by oil, but also the world economic crisis, and also the self-sabotage of the political class. No, Venezuelan economic elites depend on oil and state wealth. You know, the only instance that produce wealth in my country is the state through the oil industry. Not in that sense, the Venezuelan economy, when they struggle against the government, you know, they sabotage the government. And that's significant that so that the sabotage the government was to sabotage themselves, you know, because it's the only source of wealth in Venezuela. No? So that has always been the Venezuelan situation, no? Which worsened with the sanctions and the blockade of the United States and the European Union. When, for example, when Venezuela had economic problem with the barrel prices in the past, he resorted to his international reserves, to his saving abroad, without, however, at this moment, they are all blocked due to the effects of the sanction of the United States and the European Union. You know, it's like you have some kind of blockade in your savings. No, okay. From the institutional perspective, Venezuela, although it has independence of power, no, like in a theory, in theory we have independence of power. No, drags from the 19th century to phenomenon of caudillismo. We have this kind of phenomenon. Caudillismo is some kind of a hyper presidentialism model, you know, that is a leader who, from totalitarian actions, control the country, the army, the institution, and the rest of the institution. Now, about the crisis institutional, there are several hypotheses that are handled, you know, among this kind of problem. For example, about the source or the beginning of crisis, several intellectual and researchers have many theories. For example, some kind of a decolonial perspective, no? And this perspective said that the crisis starting 1492, you know, when Colon arrived to America, no? and that states that the institutional crisis and in general all the modes of crisis that Venezuela and Latin America, experiencing is due to the implementation of a mode about a mestizo culture that is not entirely modern or Western civilization, Therefore, every attempt to manage of nation in the modern way is nothing but is a failed attempt. No, this is like the colonial perspective. No, another perspective or hypothesis is like our crisis start or beginning in 1920, in the start of the 20th centuries. No, it is the year in which the so-called, or that I told you, the rentier capitalism began, the culture of oil, no, which is what we have already mentioned, no, the hyper dependence of oil, no. So we have another date in 2002. This year was the coup against Hugo Chavez, orchestrated by the Chamber of Commerce in Venezuela and several television channels aligned with the anti-Chavism agenda, where he established a brief government by self-proclaiming. The head of the Chamber of Commerce, we can see in this picture, Pedro Carmona Estanga, president of Fede Cámaras, proclaiming himself president of Venezuela. So this situation generates an unprecedented institutional breakdown that continues to drag on. We live some kind of effect or an echo of this institutional broke, no? That is to say, from here the anti-force government seek to seize political control, not through elections, but through the seizure of violent power, and even calling for foreign military intervention. No? Faced with this, the government, it has developed greater authoritarianism, more authoritarian government to stay in power, to maintain the power through the armed forces, like a response of this kind of coup d'etat, no? In this kind of sense, we can see the reporters from the UN, for example, the reports in matters of violence, the human rights stuff. We can see the reports on the matter are now. No? So other of this kind of hypothesis that maybe the crisis starts or beginning in 2010 or 2013, the fall in oil prices, the death of Hugo Chavez, etc., presents an even more complex scenario of political instability. The death of Caudillo is some kind of result in instability in our countries. Another question is the Venezuelan immigration. Others intellectuals or academic researchers in Venezuela have this hypothesis, faced with the political instability, the fall of the currency, for example, the hyperinflation phenomenon, the crisis begin humanitarian. People begin to migrate looking for better living conditions. In the same time, the president of the republic declared the National Assembly in contempt. There was irregularities in the election of 3 opposition senators. In this moment, Juan Guaidó proclaims himself president in charge and Maduro in response of convince of National Constituent Assembly, to deactivate the National Assembly. Some kind of shock of the law shock, some kind of a tension between the same laws, the constitutional and electoral law. This clash provokes the recognition of Juan Guaidó by the United States and the European Union, what we have already mentioned, no? The embargo of all Venezuelan assets abroad and the impossibility of negotiation its oil with the rest of the world. So to summarize, like I told you, we have a lot of topics to talk about the Venezuelan stuff, no? So if I offer to you some kind of current challenge or ways to resolve our situation, for example, as has been seen, no, it's very complex. The scenario to summarize in a few words. Nevertheless, if it's a matter of presenting current challenge, no, we could name, for example, institutional regularization and international recognition of the presidential figure, no, an understanding between the political class is, I think, the key to reaching agreements to have benefits from the population and the health of the nation, you know. Another one is the lifting of sanction and the normalization of relation with the United States and the European Union, so that Venezuela can access its wealth and return to trade oil seamlessly with the entire world like in the past, no. The recovery of the oil industry to reach the production levels that Venezuelan had. I think maybe not is the only, no, but of all of this would create conditions for recovery at different aspects of the country, no, such as health, food, education, resolve the migration problem, for example. No? In that sense, if you want, you know, have different approach to the Venezuelan problem, you can start with these books. I recommend you this literature. So finally, I hope this information is useful for you for your studies on Latin America. It's very important topic, I think, about the future of all the world. It's a very important region in resource, not only in resource, natural resource stuff. We have a very important a very important, you know, situation in a geopolitical point of view, and I think we should have to approach more to Latin American struggles. No? Any question about it, I will appreciate it if you could send me with the Professor Rogelio. I will gladly to answer them with the passion that you deserve. No? Thank you very much for the information, and I hope this information is useful for your studies.